Your toddler just lost their mind because you cut their toast the wrong way. Not the wrong food, not the wrong time, the wrong shape. And now they are on the floor, screaming, kicking, tears streaming down their face like the world is genuinely ending. And you are standing there, tired, confused, maybe a little embarrassed if you are in public, wondering what on earth is wrong with your child. Nothing is wrong with your child. What you are watching is not a behavior problem. It is not bad parenting. It is not attitude. It is not manipulation. It is not your toddler trying to control you or test you or ruin your day. What you are watching is a brain doing exactly what it is built to do at this stage of development. And once you understand what is actually happening inside that tiny skull, everything changes. Not just how you respond in the moment, how you see your child entirely. So let's talk about the anatomy. Because the answer to why your toddler cannot control their emotions is not found in a parenting technique or a discipline strategy. It is found in neuroscience. And it is simpler and more fascinating than you might expect. The human brain is not one single structure. It is more like 3 layers built on top of each other over millions of years of evolution. The deepest layer, the brainstem, controls the most basic survival functions: breathing, heart rate, hunger, sleep. It is fully developed at birth because without it, your baby would not survive. The middle layer is the limbic system. This is the emotional brain. It processes feelings, generates reactions, registers threat and safety, and drives the fight or flight response. This system comes online very early in life and is highly active and highly reactive in young children. And then there is the outermost layer, the prefrontal cortex. This is the thinking brain, the part responsible for logic, reasoning, impulse control, emotional regulation, empathy, decision-making, the ability to pause before reacting. This is the part that allows an adult to feel furious but choose not to scream, to feel afraid but choose to stay calm, to feel overwhelmed but choose to take a breath instead. Here is the part that changes everything. The prefrontal cortex is the last part of the brain to develop. It does not fully mature until a person is in their mid-20s, 25 years old. And in a toddler, a child aged 1 to 3, it has barely begun to develop at all. The connections between the emotional brain and the thinking brain are still forming. The pathway that allows a feeling to be intercepted, processed, and regulated before it becomes a full-blown reaction is not yet built. It is under construction. It will take another 2 decades to complete. This means that when your toddler feels something, and toddlers feel everything with the full force of adult emotion, but with none of the neurological tools to manage it, that feeling goes straight from the emotional brain into the body, with almost nothing in between. No filter, no pause, no ability to say to themselves, "This is just toast. This is not actually a catastrophe. I can handle this feeling." None of that is available to them yet. Not because they are choosing not to use it, because the structure that would allow them to use it does not exist yet. Think about what that actually feels like. Imagine having all the emotional intensity of a fully feeling adult human: the frustration, the disappointment, the rage, the overwhelm, with no capacity whatsoever to regulate it. No ability to talk yourself down. No ability to see the bigger picture. No ability to even identify what you are feeling, let alone manage it. That is the neurological reality of being a toddler. Every emotion is enormous. Every emotion is immediate. And every emotion is completely beyond their control to stop once it has started. Now think about what happens in the brain when the emotional system is fully activated, when your toddler tips into a full meltdown. Neuroscientists call this becoming dysregulated. And when a child becomes dysregulated, the emotional brain essentially takes over. The amygdala, the small almond-shaped structure in the center of the brain that acts as the threat detection system, fires intensely. It floods the body with stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. The heart rate goes up. The breathing becomes rapid. The muscles tense. The body enters a survival state. And in that state, the already underdeveloped prefrontal cortex goes even further offline. You literally cannot think your way through a meltdown, and neither can your child. The thinking brain has been temporarily hijacked by the survival brain. Reason does not work in that moment. Logic does not work. Explaining why the toast shape does not matter does not work. Because the part of the brain that could receive and process that information is not currently available. This is why reasoning with a mid-meltdown toddler is completely futile. Not because your child is being difficult, because their brain is physiologically incapable of reasoning in that state. You might as well ask someone having a panic attack to solve a maths problem. The biology simply does not support it. So what does work? What can you actually do when your toddler is in the middle of a full emotional storm? The answer comes back to what we talked about in the nervous system: co-regulation. Because a toddler cannot regulate themselves, they need to borrow your regulation. Your calm nervous system is the external regulator for their immature one. When you stay calm in the face of the storm, when you lower your voice instead of raising it, when you soften your face instead of tensing it, when you breathe slowly instead of holding your breath, you are not just managing the situation. You are literally lending your child your nervous system until theirs can come back online. This is not about being a perfect, serene parent who never loses their temper. This is about understanding the biology well enough to know what your child actually needs in that moment. They do not need a lecture. They do not need consequences. They do not need to be sent to their room to calm down alone, because a toddler cannot self-regulate. Sending them away to do so is like asking someone who cannot swim to get themselves out of the water. What they need is your presence, your calm, your body near theirs, your voice low and steady, your face soft. That is what reaches them. That is what helps the emotional brain come down from its peak state and allows the nervous system to gradually return to baseline. The other thing that is critical to understand is that meltdowns are not chosen. Your toddler is not deciding to have a meltdown. They are not calculating that if they scream loud enough, you will give them what they want. Very young children do not have the cognitive capacity for that kind of strategic thinking. What is happening is much simpler and much more innocent than that. They had a feeling. The feeling was too big, and their brain had no way to contain it. That is the whole story. And once you see it that way, once you stop interpreting the meltdown as defiance and start seeing it as a neurological event, your response to it changes completely. The frustration you feel does not disappear, but it gets replaced by something closer to compassion. Because you are not dealing with a child who is trying to make your life difficult. You are dealing with a child whose brain genuinely cannot do what you are asking it to do yet. Now let's talk about what this means in the longer term. Because understanding your toddler's emotional brain is not just about surviving the meltdowns. It is about building something. Every time you co-regulate with your child, every time you stay calm, name their feeling, stay present, and help them come down from a dysregulated state, you are not just managing the moment. You are building the neural pathways that will eventually allow them to regulate themselves. The connections between the emotional brain and the thinking brain are literally being built through these repeated experiences of being helped back to calm. You are the scaffolding for a structure they will eventually own entirely on their own. And the more consistent and warm and present you are in those moments, the stronger that structure becomes. Research in developmental neuroscience shows that children who are consistently co-regulated by a calm, responsive caregiver in early childhood develop better emotional regulation skills, better attention, better social skills, and better mental health outcomes in the long run. Not because they were taught techniques or given rewards for staying calm, but because their nervous systems were repeatedly helped back to baseline by a trusted adult, and that repeated experience literally shaped the developing architecture of their emotional brain. This does not mean you cannot set limits. It does not mean every meltdown should be indulged or that your toddler should never experience frustration. Frustration is actually important. Small doses of manageable frustration, followed by support, are part of how emotional resilience is built. But it does mean that the way you respond to the meltdown matters enormously. Not for discipline, for development. There is one more thing worth saying, and it is the part that most parenting conversations skip entirely. Your own nervous system in these moments matters as much as your child's. If you grew up in a household where big emotions were not welcomed, where losing control meant punishment, where you had to manage your own feelings alone from a very young age, then your toddler's meltdown may trigger something deep in your own nervous system. It may feel intolerable. It may feel like a threat. It may activate your own fight or flight response, making it almost impossible to stay calm and present. That is not a personal failing. That is your own nervous system doing what it was shaped to do. But it is worth knowing. Because the most powerful thing you can do for your child's emotional development is to work on your own regulation. Not to become emotionless or endlessly patient, but to understand your own triggers well enough that you can pause before you react. That pause is the most important moment in the interaction. Your toddler cannot control their emotions yet. Their brain is not built for it. But every time you meet their storm with your calm, every time you stay present instead of pulling away, every time you name what they are feeling instead of dismissing it, every time you help them come back to safe instead of leaving them to find it alone, you are building the brain they will use for the rest of their life. It is not about perfect parenting. It is about understanding what is actually happening. And now you do. If this gave you a different way of seeing your toddler, subscribe to this channel right now. For real brain science, for real parents, in language that actually makes sense. Drop a comment below and tell me the most recent thing your toddler had a meltdown over. Because the toast shape answers alone will make my entire week. See you next time.